right?
Yeah.
It's so good.
Episode 262 with my three cousins, Walter, Chris Collier, and Tim Greer. I overheard them talking about DARPA, and now I'm interested.
I love how you silver
Okay,
motherfuckers
this-
loving this.
Go on.
This started probably about 2.5 hours ago. He was reading my book on climate change, and then that morphed into a conversation about debt to GDP and modern monetary theory and the mythical emphasis on mythical Keynesian multiplier. And then from there, where did we go from there?
I don't care where you were. Just keep going where you were. Just start off where you were. I heard you guys talking about DARPA, the private industry.
So you don't want us to
No, just keep going. I don't care.
Okay, so
I heard you talking about DARPA. You saying DARPA, and I heard Walter say something about how they have a vampiric grip on the market.
Yeah,
and
so
then
we're-
I heard.
No, because I was about to make
Just
a
keep
salient
going.
point,
Just
I think.
pretend that it's not
Because-
here. Just pretend it's not here. Keep
yeah,
going.
because you're saying, okay, so I made the point that
It's recording.
I
I'm going to
think-
pee.
yeah, that's
keep
fine.
talking.
I think that that Walmart has more responsibility to me than the DMV does. Ironically, okay. And my point is, dude, is that with one tweet from some random fucking woke customer, Target pulled a book from sale. Now, if whether or not I agree with it, there's a degree of responsibility to your customer base exhibited there.
Okay. My counter to that is that through the single story of the Reagan era, about the welfare queen with 13 Social Security numbers, who supposedly bought a Cadillac despite having never worked, he got welfare reform. There was a big story pushed. On top of that, we have other stories like in the 1990s.
Okay, but what does that have to do with what I'm talking about?
My point is that there is some sort of public responsibility and some public accountability when it comes to a single actor acting badly regarding a single story. Well, Target may have pulled a book based on one tweet, but there was a push towards welfare reform based on a single story of a woman who, whether or not she existed, it was a single story pushed obviously by the president, so it's a little bit different. My idea is that a single...
Okay, but that was not picking the push an agenda, though.
But I would argue that you are also saying the same thing because you are pointing towards one specific customer, in quotes, who pushed the idea of a certain book being offensive as to justify their point that the book should be pulled. Target responded.
Okay.
You're applying
Okay,
this.
I can give you a lot more examples that aren't just one.
I know, there's a lot more examples, but I can also give you more examples. I mean, the U.S. justified the invasion of Kuwait in the 1990s through the story of the nurse in Kuwait talking about how they pulled babies out of incubators. My point is that you can always extrapolate a single person's story into saying that a much larger shift in the policy of not just a public organization, but also a private organization.
But we're tangentially off from single payer healthcare again. Mm-hmm. So like, let's. Am I correct, or am I just like totally derailing the conversation?
You're correct in the sense that we are getting off the topic of conversation. However, I think it's relevant to bring this up.
Okay.
Specifically in regard to actually bring up Walmart as a perfect example. Talking about exactly, Walmart's a good example for a lot of things because Walmart is an idea of how a centralized power overseeing millions of people can actually direct some sort of incentive structure. I mean, Walmart is a company that employs 3 million people.
Okay,
it's the
but
second biggest
inherently
employer.
the incentive structure is different between the two entities, and I don't think that fact can be overlooked.
Well, why is it different?
The incentive structure between Walmart and the federal government?
Not Walmart and the federal government. The federal government is, it's a term that really encompasses a lot of things.
The federal government.
Yes.
Dude, don't boil down the federal government to an all-encompassing term. Like, there is more to it than that.
Of course, there's departments here. So let's talk about not just Walmart versus the federal government. Let's talk about Walmart versus the Defense Department or the Pentagon in particular. I'd love to hear what your example of the difference between Walmart and the Defense Department is, because both of them employ a similar number of people, and I would argue that they actually function very similar to one another. The Department of Defense employs, I believe, about 3 million people. Walmart employs about 2 million people. And I think they operate in very similar ways that is not quite as black and white as a lot of conservatives who kind of employ the idea of free market fundamentalism would really want to believe. So I'd like to hear what you believe the real difference between Walmart and the Department of Defense is.
Well, stated goals, first and foremost.
Well, obviously stated goals between Walmart and the Department of Defense are different, but fundamentally in the structure and the supply chain management, I'd love to hear they're different.
Okay, well, first of all...
and by the way, this wraps all the way back to single.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Okay. Well, my first response to that is I was going to say that the Pentagon, the DoD, like is a quote unquote public institution that relies heavily on the private market. Now you can also make the argument that Walmart relies heavily on the private market as well, because like so.
That's in the private and the public sector, but also go on, yeah.
Sorry, what?
The Walmart does rely heavily, despite being a private sector company. Walmart relies heavily in the public sector, but
The public sector as a customer base, but singularly as a customer base.
Well, also Walmart relies on the public sector to subsidize the low wages of their employees to essentially provide them to the point where they can have a living wage, whatever that means. In the sense that Walmart is one of the
fair point.
Yeah, Walmart is one of the larger welfare recipients in the sense that the federal government, the taxpayer, subsidizes the Walmart employee. In regards to not only things like food stamps, but also in regards to like Medicaid, insurance providing functions, and a number of other systems. The taxpayer is really funding Walmart to allow them to pay their employees such a low wage. And also to bring back to my original point, which is that Walmart operates very similar to the federal government. But go on with your point about Walmart.
I think you're making a fair point, and this is not something I've thought about, so I don't want to start like firing from the hip, like just retort style arguments. You know what I mean? I don't know, and maybe I would just kind of do this in perpetuity, like just as a means of creating argument. But I think again the Pentagon is kind of like another outlier example in that the Pentagon operates and has mandates far different in scope and desire and intent than a lot of other public sector agencies, so to speak, right? And they operate in latitudes that are not provided to other types of government organizations. So think budget, where you're willing to turn a blind eye, what they're willing to do, what's at stake, et cetera, right? So, like, we'll come back to the DMV, right? So you say, well, what's going to happen if the DMV doesn't get to operate in the way that they want to? People are going to have to wait in lines. Like, that frustrates the shit out of people, but it is not nearly as salient an argument as saying, if we hamstring the Pentagon, ISIS might wind up with a nuclear weapon. You know what I mean?
But to bring in the idea of, underfunding the DMV leading to longer lines, for example, the reason that happens...
Tim, watch your foot. That's for the broken glasses.
A similar example is because the DMV also has a monopoly on the idea of driver's licenses, for example. In a similar fashion, if you look at the way that Walmart operates in a lot of rural America, they have essentially a monopoly on providing goods and services to people in rural America. Regardless of how much you disagree with the way the DMV or Walmart functions, they are both going to really not lose much of a customer base because of the fact that you really can't go anywhere else.
Disagree, dude. Okay. Insert Amazon.
Amazon absolutely is taking over the place of Walmart, but I'm glad you brought up Amazon because Amazon is heavily subsidized by the U.S. Postal Service. They were at their inception. They continue to be heavily subsidized. True.
And to that point, the U.S. Postal Service has been a means to an end to the point I'm about to make, but Amazon is now creating an independent distribution network, right?
Really?
Sorry. Yeah, 100%.
Sorry.
Yeah, like, so where you used to see like UPS 18-wheelers ripping down the highway, now alongside those you'll see Amazon ones.
Okay.
Right? So like, you like anything from like meme videos about the quality of like shipping industry, like shipping companies or delivery companies. You'll see now not just USPS, FedEx, and UPS, but Amazon as an independent parcel service.
Fuck, I didn't know that.
So, yeah, dude, and they're gonna get into all types of shit like
probably cargo planes.
No, I don't. But that falls under the umbrella of like parcel service.
Okay.
I'm talking about like entire industries, like healthcare, for example. Like you will see. You will see Amazon become a purveyor of health.
And I don't want to jump into this conversation because I'm enjoying watching this, but I was going to say, it's almost like when someone gets really rich and then they start investing in a bunch of different fields to maintain that wealth no matter what.
Yeah, no.
Amazon starts as Amazon and it's just creeping in everything.
Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, and someone else got into like a healthcare initiative, I think a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. and I forget what it's called and what the stated goals are, but essentially it's like something to do with a particular type of healthcare system that they want to develop, and they're rolling it out with their employees first as like, a proof of concept. But either way, so Walter, like, I think I see the points that you're making, and I think you're making fair points, and I honestly think that right now I'm only going to be able to provide like hip-fired argumentative counterpoints for the sake of making them, because I haven't really thought this out that much.
Okay. Well, I'm not entirely sure what you're referring to with the Amazon rolling out.
No, you said
You said Walmart providing the only goods.
No. So I only brought that up because he was asking about Amazon getting into different sectors.
Sorry.
So, like,
Sorry.
Well, I actually want to. This actually has some carryover here, because if you look at the way that the CIA in particular operated in the 1980s, despite the fact that much like Amazon, they were initially subsidized by the U.S. government, they eventually
the CIA.
Yes.
No shit.
Yeah, well, my point is that they eventually branched into their own form of money making with the way that they actually Iran-Contra, and with the idea that they funneled cocaine to the U.S. Yes, exactly. So my point is that while
Dale Comstock, episode 50.
Exactly. Well, despite the fact that Amazon and Amazon and the CIA are two wildly different companies, they both take advantage of the fact that they enjoy a combination of both public sector funding as well as providing their own ways to raise assets to fund their own operations.
Fair enough, dude. But again, I'm going to counter with that I think that that's purely capitalistic opportunism, and that they would be able, maybe not, but almost just as easily without that public sector tit to suck off of. You know what I mean?
So then why has there not been a viable alternative to Amazon that has arisen entirely from private sector money? And why is it in fact that you're going to find very few companies of that size that have not come about without any government money?
Because
it's just Amazon.
But dude, now are we making like a fucking Elizabeth Warren style argument that there's no such thing, like you didn't build that, and there's no such thing as like private capitalism because you utilize the roads and infrastructure that was paid for with public money?
Well, it'd be different if you're talking about just the roads and infrastructure that were available to every single company that was starting up.
Dude, I know that's an unfair equation. I understand that, but I'm just like, I'm making a straw man argument.
Yeah, and it's a valid argument, except you're ignoring the fact that Amazon was not entitled to all the same public services that all other companies were in the United States. Amazon was given a very special set of rules that applied only to Amazon, which allowed them to flourish. And the justification was that ultimately economic growth and everything would increase. However, this all ties back into my original argument, universal healthcare, single-payer healthcare rather, that by providing a simple source of public sector funding at the very inception of these projects, that if you allow them to grow and flourish, eventually they will pay for themselves many times over. I'm not going to deny that Amazon, through the few billions of dollars of public funding they took at essentially their inception, not just their inception, but throughout their growth as a company, that they eventually became very profitable and also provided a service that was so beneficial to the U.S. public that very few people would say that their tax dollars were wasted going towards Amazon. My point is that when it comes to single-player healthcare, when you provide a certain amount of money at the get-go, the inception of these projects, eventually, as time goes on, it could be 10 years, it could be 20 years, it could be a very long time, they will pay for themselves many times over. So that's kind of why the Amazon argument, I think, really wraps up kind of the culmination of switching from a private sector to a public sector model when it comes to single-payer healthcare. Because much like Amazon, you have to put in money at the get-go, and it's also going to be a bit of a rough transition into getting things going. But eventually, when it comes to single-payer healthcare, things are going to pay for themselves many times over, not just in actual preventative measures when it comes to, simple diseases like asthma, where you have to provide an inhaler. I know I brought that up before. But also in the entrepreneurship opportunities created by people not being tied to their employer-based healthcare, and also eventually to getting rid of a lot of the bloat that comes along with dealing with the relationship that the U.S. public sector healthcare, like Medicaid, Medicare, as well as FICA, and also these I can't remember the exact organization name that supplies DoD employees, but things like that. The way that set of organizations, the relationship that they have with the private sector, the interactions are largely contributing to the bloat of the system and to the cost of the public healthcare market as we know it, as well as the private healthcare market. There's a lot of things that go into the system that are creating the large cost of healthcare, but it can largely be eliminated through a sort of single centralized provider of healthcare, provided there is a bit of a transition at first. Walmart is also a good example of what I'm talking about because of the fact that Walmart, like I've said before, Walmart has about 2 million employees, the department has 3 million employees. Despite that fact, Walmart has created a system where from the top down, they managed to supply a certain quality of product that has existed for a long time. It's a centralized power of sorts in the private sector that supplies millions of people with a variety of products and employment, yet they have done so efficiently despite the fact that, free marketing services have talked about the fact that the free market requires many individual actors to interact with one another and both fail and succeed to create the best possible product.
Okay, there's a lot wrapped up in that.
I know.
Okay, so I'm going to try to hold all these thoughts at once. Number one, okay, so you're talking about the allocation of public monies as like a seed for an idea or
Exactly.
or whatever it might be. Okay, if I provide you with money to go to what do you call dentistry school?
Just dental school.
Dental
To go
school.
to dental school. Am I a dentist?
No, but
Okay,
you are
but-
somebody's. No.
Okay, but just because I provided you with funds to do something doesn't mean that I had the wherewithal, infrastructure, drive, or ability to make it happen. So I see what you're saying, and I think we're now talking about two completely different arguments, which is funding. You guys going up?
Good night, Pat.
Good night, guys.
Good night, Tasha.
Funding for versus execution and execution of. And then you're talking about like when you were getting into talking about single payer there, I think you were making more an argument for, again, not like an argument for, not necessarily an explanation of. Like, you're making an argument for doing it versus an explanation for execution. You know what I mean? So you're saying we need to do it. And again, like I said, like my political priors, like give me this guttural reaction like a single payer healthcare. But when I think about it intellectually, I'm like, I think that like that is ground I'm willing to cede, because I think that ultimately it's in the greater good. Like I don't think that the healthcare system serves the public en masse the way that we need for a better America. But again, like you were just making an argument for. Like I don't see how any of that equates to execution of, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that's about.
you know what I'm saying? But and I just like we'll hit on all these things, but I just want to like get this out before I lose the idea, right?
Uh-huh.
And then the last like thing that kind of stuck out to me was you're talking about like top down.
Centralized control.
Yeah, centralized control, top-down management. I see nothing that's anti-private sector about that. Like if you talk to any entrepreneur, any capitalist, I would imagine, at least the ones that I've talked to or that I listen to, they're like, this is my company. I'm going to respond to market needs and market demands, but this is my company. I might have like a group of people that I deal with. I might consult, but I'm the one that's dictating how my company is run. And I live or die based on the quality of my arguments and the quality of the product that I'm putting forward and the way that I do so. And just then you talk about the way that they interact with other private entities. Now we're getting into an argument of the system, not necessarily like one particular organism of the private market. You know what I mean? So you have a bunch of different top-down organisms that all exist within the private sector that work together to accomplish something. I don't see, like, it seems to me like you're equating top-down management to something that is inherently public, and I don't see that link at all.
Well, so regarding that,
does that make sense? Do you follow what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, which is that I think what it really boils down to is that the public sector has a lot less accountability than the private sector, or vice versa, rather. The private sector has more accountability.
Disagree,
than the public sector.
man. The private sector has accountability to shareholders in the market.
That's more what I meant. Is that the private? You're saying the private sector has more accountability than the public sector.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, because dude, look how much fucking bullshit comes out of the government.
I would count.
Like, do you think that the government is efficient? Do you think that the government does, like, dollar for dollar, a good job at executing?
I would say that
its goals.
I would say that
not outside of the Pentagon. I would say.
I was gonna say Manhattan Project.
Yeah, I would say outside of the Pentagon, which is built on a foundation of pork. I'm not gonna argue that. Like, I would say I would say they don't do a good job.
Yes, so I do agree the public sector has a lot of problems, specifically with the bloat and the fact that it costs a lot of money to do anything in this country.
Where else do you fail up the way that you do in the government?
Well, look at how many executives caused the market crash in 2008 that continue to have high-paying jobs.
And you know why that is? because they got federal bailouts.
Yes, why did they get federal bailouts?
Because the lie of too big to fail was propagated on the American people.
Why was it? Why did things? Okay, but it wasn't a lie of too big to fail. It was a reality, which was that things are too big to fail.
No, I disagree. So, are you familiar with Peter Schiff at all?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I definitely will hear a lot about his like heart.
Is that leaning in now?
Yeah, it is.
It's starting to change shape.
Yeah, that's about to collapse. Oh no, it's still supported.
I'm not really sure what's going to do that, to be honest.
I mean,
That is a destined to hurt something.
Nobody should touch the table.
just let's pretend that's not there. And Chris was definitely just leaning against
so
that.
like he has this like completely unadulterated like raw belief and ideal in capitalism, and I don't buy that. Like I definitely am much more of a capitalist, like protectionist / free marketist than I think a lot of my friends would be, for example. But he's like, unrestricted capitalism will always result in safe, globally beneficial outcomes, period. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly.
Of course.
But I do think that there's something to be... Dude, I fucking just lost my train of thought.
Who cares? Just keep doing it. It doesn't matter.
No, I know, but I was going to make a point.
Pentagon efficiency built on pork. Outside of the Pentagon, government efficiency. Do you think the government's efficient? Bailouts.
Yeah. The ballots. And why do I think that? Too big to fail, right?
Yes.
So, I think he made a very good point about 2008, right? Which was we had this whole lie propagated upon us that was, banks are too big to fail and the system can't be allowed to go through a natural restructuring based on its own bad action, right? Based on the results of its own bad action. And let's all take this with the caveat that I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, and I am very open to the idea that I'm just totally wrong. Okay. But
this whole podcast is based on that.
Yeah.
I mean, not this episode, this podcast.
But once you get people believing that X cannot fail, that X failing equals disaster, you will then do anything, and that means that, and part of that is you will take the people that generated this, keep them in power because they're the only ones that know how to do it, and you're going to give them a bunch of money to do so.
Okay. And
but so not to draw on about this, but and again, dude. Really, I could be fucking wrong, but you don't think that allowing, and what happened after all of that happened, right? We saw the greatest consolidation of wealth and banking power after Dodd-Frank than had ever existed in the United States, because regulation became so prohibitive that now banks can't pay to keep up with the regulation, so they get bigger. Right now, we now have the 5 biggest banks that have ever existed as a result of that, right?
yes, and The reason.
So there would have been pain, but I don't think that there would have been system-wide disaster.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned this concept, which is the idea of too big to fail being kind of a. You act as if this was something that naturally came about. I know you mentioned regulation specifically propping up the idea of the monopolizing bank and the fact that banks consolidated with one another to essentially create such structures that are too big to fail. However, it's worth bringing this back to my original point that by seeding money,
Because dude, who wrote these regulations?
Well,
Banking lobbyists.
exactly.
Listen, I am not gonna buy for 1 second that banks are paying hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars to lobbyists to write regulations that they're not cool.
Of course,
And it's not to be fair.
Nobody really.
Keep us in check, guys.
Yeah, I mean that's.
Yeah. Make sure that you're strong arbiters of truth and fairness.
I know I'm doing cocaine off a hooker's ass on a speedboat made of gold, but you know.
I got a best. Keep going.
Well, okay. Well, I want to ask you about what I listened in on when I heard you guys talking and impromptu.
Well, I have a few points for Tim as well.
Yeah. But I just want to fill the gap while he's pissing.
Okay.
Just real quick, what were you saying about DARPA and vampiric effects on it wrapping around the industry and sucking out money? I just thought that was cool. I thought it was cool wording.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I was talking about the fact that DARPA and the Pentagon. The Pentagon's budget is largely just a vampire that is actually acting in the American public sector in the sense that the Pentagon has repeatedly throughout time used public sector money to seed projects in such a way that they only benefit the private sector. It's not just a matter of DARPA, it's also a matter of, obviously the main project of DARPA, which people are familiar with, is the internet itself. Yeah. You can also look towards the GPS, you can look towards the nuclear weapon. That's something necessarily benefited the.
But even nuclear energy, it never took over like Eisenhower wanted it to.
You're right about that.
It was supposed to be power too cheap to meter. It was supposed to take over. It was supposed to surprise. And it does what? I mean, what?
What is this?
It does very
he said nuclear. Can you come closer for audio?
Nuclear power.
Nuclear power, and I said it was. You guys get back to your argument.
I'm gonna try and address the best I can, which is that. This is again the idea we're talking about of the idea of seeding money in order to prevent or rather benefit society as a whole. And it's funny you brought up the idea of consolidation of banks because this is largely something that you saw as a result of not just a public sector and a politician attempt to increase the power of banks, but also as a lack of willpower to decrease the effective consolidation of monopolies in the market. This is again something that could have been prevented, the idea of too big to fail, but rather it was something that was allowed to continue as a result of not just a lack of regulation, but a lack of enforcement of regulation. This has everything to do with my kind of ultimate point with everything, which is that the government has to make some sort of concerted effort in order to create good ideals. It's not just a matter of preventing bad ideals, but rather that they have to actively attempt to create some good in order to ultimately benefit society as a whole. This is really the ultimate argument, in my opinion, of the single-parent healthcare model. It's not just that it would reduce bloat, it would reduce costs, it would make people's lives easier, but that in just providing a little bit of not only money, but also reorganization of the structures, you would ultimately, after some time, reduce the overall costs of the system. Healthcare is very unique in the sense that obviously it's not as much of an insurance as something like homeowners insurance, where occasionally somebody goes bust, their house burns down, for example, and as a result of the policy they're paying into ever so slightly, they ultimately reap a great reward that benefits them over everything else. Healthcare is unique because everybody uses it essentially every year for smaller transactions. And when you fail to actively seek out healthcare, it's not just that it is a negative effect on you as an individual in that particular moment, but rather that as your health problems grow worse and worse, eventually, it becomes a much bigger burden on the system. One. Exactly, an exponential burden, and it's something that by just a little bit of preventative care at the beginning, you can really stop the system from, or rather the individual case from ballooning out of control and preventing a lot of bloat that just didn't have to be there to begin with. Just like with 2008 with the bailouts, just a little bit of push in the right direction at the very beginning. And when I say beginning, I mean like 1999 not repealing Glass-Steagall would have prevented 2008 by preventing the systems from coming down and coalescing as they did in order to allow for this massive meltdown of the entire system. I'm forgetting exactly what other points you made at this.
Well, let's forget about all that because I want to get back onto this topic because we've gone so far off topic.
I would like to hear about nuclear weapons.
Okay.
No, just keep going.
Okay, so
I'm just being
because I honestly, dude, this is an argument that I rarely have with people that doesn't just devolve into just slinging
tribalism, and then it eventually turns into you're a faggot. I hate your hair.
I think we're having a legitimate good faith argument, and like I said, man, I really am open to the idea. I think that the healthcare system is broken. I'm really open to the idea of. For all of my beliefs and personal responsibility, yada, 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 in generating a system that creates a better America and a healthier America that has more capital available to pursue ends besides just preventing preventable death is innately beneficial. So I hear everything you're saying, but the arguments that you're making to me right now feel like arguments to convince me that single payer could be a good idea. Okay, I'm sold. Single payer could be a good idea. Now, here's obviously the fucking the Jupiter-sized ball of wax that is the problem of healthcare in this country, single payer versus private person versus what the fuck ever, which is, do you have any arguments that you can make to me as to why we should pivot, not why, how we could effectively pivot away towards something like a single payer plan? Because, dude, I agree. Reactive medicine is garbage. I think a lot of the reactive medicine we use is garbage. I think that preventative medicine, in a more holistic sense, not to use the woo word that I think, similarly to regulation, stirs up a lot of that guttural reaction from people when you say something like holistic whole body medicine, right? How do we, given the situation that we're in, move towards something like that in an effective manner?
So, a few things to address this in particular. If I was to propose to you that a system worked 33 out of 34 times. I'm talking about as far as, obviously the negotiation of pharmaceutical prices between the public sector healthcare industry as well as the private sector pharmaceutical industry is a good example of it. However, I would go back to actually looking at the way that pharmaceuticals are developed. Again, looking at the fact that they are really, at the most basic level, created by public interests. They are created by public research universities, medical schools. Pharmaceutical companies then take advantage of the compounds that are discovered by these institutions, run them through very expensive trials to create the best possible product, market it, bring it to market. So you can look at the idea of lowering the cost of pharmaceuticals, which is tremendous. It's many hundreds of billions of dollars industry. You can reduce the cost of the industry in that regard by not just getting rid of the legislation preventing negotiation of prices between Medicare, Medicaid, and other public sector insurance companies and private pharmaceutical companies, by also just being the middleman to begin with and actually tying up more government grants to institutions that are developing these incredible medicines, as well as institutions that are lost my train of thought. Institutions that are ultimately creating a greater benefit at a much lower cost than the private sector actually could. So that's just one example of how we could actually create a public sector option that really worked. Another example is the idea that we can eliminate a lot of bloat exactly through reducing the number of people that are required to negotiate the various systems that already exist between the public and private sector. The fact that public sector hospitals have to deal with private sector insurance companies and various payouts, and the fact that there is an issue of hundreds of thousands of people that is associating with actually managing this bizarre system of coding and negotiations and everything else. dealing with all of that, and also with preventing the number of healthcare conditions by imposing regulations, not only on certain additives to foods, but also through preventative medicine, which is a huge part of it. Getting rid of a lot of the people that are frankly grifting off the system in the private sector. You then would have to go to a sort of point of essentially just lowering the age of Medicare eligibility until you work your way all the way down to 0, and that's how you'd actually get to the idea of a Medicare for all, for lack of a better term. You can call it whatever you want, public health, if a single payer healthcare, but you'd have to just essentially lower the age of eligibility slowly over time, gradually work out the actual private sector act as an insurance company, subsidize the cost, or rather subsidize the quality of public insurance, and then slowly but surely drive the private sector industries out of the marketplace over time, not dramatically, before you finally garnished a public health care option that actually worked. This could take decades, frankly. But it's a matter of not just political will, but also of affordability, because we can't continue to go down the path that we currently are. Dude. That's really the entire kind of culmination of everything I would do. And I like I said, we don't really know how long we're talking about, but this is just some obvious solutions I can talk about lowering the cost of insurance, and not just lowering the cost of insurance, but increasing the public good by preventing a lot of the issues that come up with having a lot of people that are uninsured, or a lot of people that are afraid to leave their insurance companies.
Okay, I feel like I just listened to a bunch of Democratic think tank intellectualizing. Okay, so those are very specific utopic ideas to me. Maybe utopic is overreaching, but okay, you've done nothing to convince me as to how any of that could be effectively implemented. So, I want, let's stick on this idea of, personal responsibility and proactive medicine as opposed to reactive medicine.
Two very different things. Proactive medicine, which
No, I agree, and I think that's part of the problem, right? Is proactive versus reactive medicine. Because if you wait for somebody to get 300 pounds, fucking have arteries made out of fucking quick cement, and then fucking go to the hospital, to go to the ER to find out that they need to take care of their health, that is reactive medicine that's then put, say, a $5,000 burden on the system for one visit.
Right. And this is something that can be discouraged, and overall as a larger system, the cost can be reduced by actually making some of those proactive measures towards regulating some of the things that people are actually eating, which is ultimately what leads to obesity.
Okay, dude,
and the reason why the U.S. is so much more obese than other countries.
Dude, there's a role in that, but I think that I feel like there's so much more that, to me, I feel like that's just like a nothing to see here phrase as we try to clean up a bunch of shit in the background.
Excuse me.
You could, you would basically, to have that be effectual, I think, you would have to regulate people down to grass-fed meat and broccoli as their diet, and that's just not going to work.
There would just be a black market for fast food.
Yeah. So what is it that you think is different between
I think it needs to be a culture.
To the U.S., something like France or Japan, where people are much less obese.
Culture
is definitely a lot of it, but I would argue that culture is not just the result of individual actions and certain social norms that incentivize people to do certain things, but also a result of the financial incentives to drive people towards eating very.
What do you think about the idea of let them fucking die?
Towards letting people who are extremely unhealthy die.
You're not gonna fucking take care of yourself. Why the fuck should I pay to have you to keep you alive?
Because it's a short-term solution to a very long-term problem.
I would people say so, realize that they're gonna fucking die if they don't take care of themselves.
Sink or swim.
You don't think that has long-term implications?
Well, you don't think that's what we currently have?
No, because we pay to keep them alive. How many people just putz along the way that they are by either going to extreme debt or just not even giving a fuck about bills, which then gets subsidized by you and I.
I don't think that that's a totally invalid argument. However, I would say that The problem with that statement is that, first of all, as people who are extremely unhealthy just die, that more people are going to come along and replace them in one way or another. I think that you're failing to realize the fact that, again, I bring this back to my original point of kind of everything, which is that by just doing a little bit at the beginning, you can really prevent a lot of the social hazard.
I feel like you're putting a bucket at the end of the hose as opposed to trying to address the rate of flow out of the hose.
It's funny because I would actually argue your specific
because I'm not actually advocating let them die.
I know it's more of a
I actually was
a straw man, or just kind of using it to exemplify your argument.
Okay, so let's parse this out for a second, because don't like the idea of regulation, but intellectually will acknowledge the value of some regulation. So, as a person that knows a little bit about health and food, the quote-unquote food that we give people in this country, it's fucking atrocious, and it's definitely killing them. So, do I think that... I think that the best way around that is to create some sort of market incentive away from using that type of food. So you want to talk about using public money to create a greater good. What if you were to create public financial incentives directed at private market to increase the value of food? Because it's fucked up when buying a pound of grass-fed beef and a head of broccoli costs me more than a fucking Big Mac, 10 chicken nuggets, a fucking XL drink, and...
But isn't that free market?
And some fries.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. And that's really a lot of what I'm talking about, actually, is not only just regulating as far as banning certain additives that have been shown to, make people unhealthy in regards to increasing inflammation and encouraging, obesity in many different regards. And there's a lot of different compounds.
It is free market. It is free market.
Exactly. Well, this is the example of free market solution, which is that not only can you...
No. Hold on. Because I think that's a fair argument. Because... Dude, that's him. Because that's the direction of the free market. That's the way that it's been incentivized right now. Now, if you want to incentivize the free market in another direction, to pick up off your point of public money going towards free market to create a...
Don't break.
Yeah.
Who did that? Chris?
Pat.
Chris did it.
Chris did it, sure. Go on.
Using public funds to incentivize the quote-unquote free market or private market towards a greater public good, why not use public funds to incentivize private market towards providing better food sources?
Well, I don't really disagree with that.
Just like an intellectual argument, you don't think that could be more effective than just saying you can't do this?
Oh, I think it's a matter of both, actually. I think that you have to incentivize the free market in order to provide a more beneficial public good. Just as, right now we actively subsidize farmers to grow more corn, for example. And ultimately that's why the cost of corn is so cheap and why high fructose corn syrup is such a common additive to food.
King corn.
Exactly. We can, point towards healthier, whatever that means,
feeds back
options.
into our climate problem, because monocropping is horrendously detrimental to the topsoil of this country.
Right, so you can really you can kill two birds with one stone here by actually actively funding.
Did you know that monocropping in the United States kills 7 billion animals a year?
I'm not surprised. Factory farming kills far more than that. But as far as the number of animals killed, I don't really think that's a
I don't think that's true. Factory farming kills 7 billion animals a year.
It might be. I'm pretty sure Tyson kills like 50 million chickens a week.
50 million chickens is a far cry from
week.
7 billion. A week?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm pretty sure
when you buy a pack of 6 chicken breasts, that's chickens that
look it up. It's like hundreds of millions.
Yeah,
like a
I
week.
think it's 4.7 billion. I don't really think that the number of animals killed is.
As a staunch advocate of a meat-based diet, I think that factory farming or factory livestock is also horrendous.
Yeah, but at the same time, what's more important, having healthy food or having cheap food? Because for the vast majority of people don't have enough money.
No, I agree, and that's an argument towards
it's like we could all have a bunch of great like free range food, but if you got like 4 kids and you're a single parent, you're just like, I don't give a fuck. Just give me the cheapest thing.
It's about $9 billion a year, by the way, just for reference.
Yeah, it's
From
insane.
factory farms.
Yeah, that's a quick check. $9 billion a year. But yeah. So anyway, yeah, I mean exactly what Tom just said, which is that you have to, provide people with an alternative, not only to not look towards the cheapest option, but to actively seek the healthiest option, not because they really want to ultimately, and that's a good thing, but because it's the cheapest option for them instead of the unhealthiest option, but the cheapest option for them. Looking towards, school lunches, for example, even though it shouldn't be the case that schools are the provider of lunches for a lot of children, the reality is that unless you want to address that issue, which is a much larger issue, you have to look towards school lunches as being something that's more of a solution than a problem, and encouraging healthy eating habits from an early age, instead of just giving kids the cheapest possible food.
Yeah, but that's gonna.
But even that, there's going to be a black market of kids just bringing Lunchables.
Fair enough, but he speaks to an important point, which is the re-envisioning of the way that we teach diet, because the way that we teach diet is horrendous. Like,
Food pyramid.
Yes.
food
Also,
pyramid
just
is fucked up.
quick question. Quick point is that if the price of Lunchables was, let's say, $7 a container, not a single parent would send their child to school with Lunchables every day. Part of the problem is that not only is it expensive to eat healthy, but it's too inexpensive to eat cheaply.
Isn't that free market? Like if everyone decided we wanted salad, someone's gonna find out how to give us salads cheaper.
No, but I agree. But that's why I'm not allowed to fair free market.
I'm just
free
throwing
market
in
protectionism,
comments.
and you could say protection from abroad, protection from within. So,
Do you think that it's even kind of like pointless to argue all these grandiose things when in reality the people at the very top are just
Well, I
going
don't
to take
think
care
that
of
we're trying to
themselves?
submit any sort of like plan to
Grand
the White House.
plan,
I mean,
yeah.
We're like
We're sending this to the
civilized
White
here.
House when it's finished. We figured it out, guys.
Yeah.
Where's the?
No, but the way that we teach diet is completely backwards. Like the idea of like processed seed oils and vegetable oils as a healthy alternative to animal fats is completely asinine.
So is the move to just accelerate technology as fast as possible in hopes that we find like just answers to all the problems?
No.
Wait, say that again?
Just kind of like, and it's a stupid approach, but it's a more simple approach to just be like, just go on like a Manhattan Project arms race to developing hyper intelligent AI and then kind of just punching in the question.
I tend to agree
that-
with Elon Musk about AI.
Just dystopian.
Yeah, but I tend to have that view about things.
It seems like it's kind of inevitable.
Oh my God, my oldest. Christopher?
Shout out, Chris. You guys should draw on him. Do you think that that's going to be a thing, or do you think that's already happening in a Manhattan Project arms race for hyper-intelligent
So
AI?
sad.
Because think about it. Like, I'm a moron. I don't know anything about football. You could give me 50 of the best football players and allow me to have 50 players on the field versus a Bill Belichick with 5 players. His mind is going to use the same a fraction of the pieces to beat me. Do you think the ultimate thing is going to be not even building a bigger army or a bigger economy? Do you think it's going to be the first nation to develop, like, God-tier AI?
Yeah, obviously.
So do you think that's going on right now?
Yeah.
Alright, who's got a Sharpie? Thank you.
So do you think you could take that God-tier
Okay,
thing,
but I think that
plug in all the data, and
it
be like,
leads to-
solve
it-
obesity?
I don't think the mere fact that other countries are doing it now means that it's no longer dystopian. I think it's a dystopian end. I think it's a race to the bottom.
Is there any way that we can get out of this, or is Pandora's box open?
Flicking his ear.
I think Pandora's box is open. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think Pandora's box is open? And we can say we shouldn't be doing this, but I mean,
He can't.
Yeah,
it's like
a race
after
to the bottom.
it's like after July 16th, 1945. It was like no one else should build nukes, but it was like, come on.
Yeah, again.
He's all upset.
So, but that being said,
bottom.
but Pandora's box is open. So now that it's open, should we at least win the race to the bottom?
Look,
Wait, what?
are you awake?
It's already open.
I'm sorry,
We're-
I'm listening to that.
yeah. Chris passed out drunk. Happy Thanksgiving. It's
He's like not. Are you taking a picture?
no. We're doing a podcast on Murray. But I was gonna say, do you think that's it's like there's no way we can undo this? Like we're already racing.
Carlin, come inside.
This is why we need AI
I mean, I think it's
to leave our human chains behind.
an argument that
I'm sorry, I'm derailing y'all's argument.
I think we derailed ourselves.
Yeah, I think
There's no topic.
It's really an argument. To know.
But do you think that, because that's one thing I've often thought about though. It seems like AI is the new, because what was the first like big like Jesus, like the first big jump was the first like true like jump above was nuclear weapons. Like we were all kind of building faster planes and piercing bullets and bigger boats. The first true like there was actually a debate in the United States and like between 45 and 47, and Annie Jacobson talks about this in her book DARPA, the Pentagon's brain.
She's the chick that wrote like
Operation
Surprise,
Paper.
Vanish, Kill.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, she's so hot. Yeah, there's she went on Rogan, but she won't go on my podcast. Fucking conceited bitch. But like, with DARPA, there was actually an argument in public discourse between 45 and 47. Just let them all die.
No.
But there was an argument.
Funny.
There was an argument between 45 and 47 about should we go in and just wipe the Soviets off the map because we will never have this high ground again. And it was actually in like public debates, and there was even I think there was
before 49.
Before 49, before Joe won, and it was said they're gonna get one. There was even like notable pacifists. I think Bertrand Russell said, I think the quote was like, we should just lick the Soviets. We're on top.
That's gnarly.
That's gnarly. That being said, they started building them, and then it was no longer an option. Do you think that possibility is coming up again with AI? Whoever has the AI is now in charge. Whoever gets the big one, it's going to be the first thing that's happened since 45. And then there's going to be that gap between, can we go from 45 to 49? Can we use this AI to just wipe out everyone else?
I don't think we're going to get the AI before the rest of them.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Whoever gets to it first is going to have that window. Should we just destroy everyone else?
What?
No, we live in too integrated a world to do that.
He's thinking.
Walter?
I think that ultimately AI will be a detrimental force.
Do you think it's coming out of us just like we kind of came out of apes? Do you think it's just the next tier? Do you think it's just the next extension and
He's thinking.
do you think it's just the next extension of like it's the next species? Do you think we're just birthing it?
Yeah. Like Joe Rogan says.
Oh, sorry. But is that so is there any way to stop it?
Walter, you hit the wall, huh?
I just hit this thing.
I feel like you guys have died. Do you want me to end it?
No, I was just severely distracted.
Carlin was distracted.
I was extremely distracted, actually. I was very distracted. I was extraordinarily distracted.
I
Just
Why
extraordinary.
do you get so much enjoyment out of fucking with him?
just let him sleep.
Why not? Because he doesn't react. Look at him. He'll stay like that for 2 hours.
So, is there any way to stop it, or is it
To
just
stop AI?
yeah?
No,
or
dude,
is
I
the
really
best,
said this.
or is the, or so then is what is the only move left? And there's no topic. I'm just kind of.
I don't fucking know, dude. I think
Is the only move to try to merge with it? It's like Elon's Neuralink is like
Dude,
the highway is going so
this is
fast.
what
Hold on. We're getting on the Autobahn, and we're like, these cars are going so fast. It's a bunch of semi trucks. We're in like a Volkswagen. We're dead no matter what. We might as well try to merge. Do you think that's what Neuralink is? Is like, yo, if we let this thing go, it's gonna just destroy us. Might as well like try to get on the in club of hyperintelligence.
I think this is going to be one of those great areas where we look back in 30 years, if we still have the ability to do so,
Are we gonna even be here, man?
and we say, holy shit, Alex Jones was right. The fucking post-humanists, dude.
What if,
We could have treated this like anything else, where you just
but the problem is there's everyone's like, we shouldn't do that, but it's like nuclear weapons. Like, we shouldn't build nuclear weapons because there's gonna be a race. That being said, we're like, yo, but what if we get them first? Then there's just that like temptation of God power.
You see this?
And that's kind of like AI right now. Everyone's like, we shouldn't build this. This is going to be a race to the bottom. But man, if we got it, we could really kick the shit out of the Chinese. It's just like that general human.
We should have nuked the Russians and the Chinese.
I think we absolutely should have. I think that was the biggest flaw ever. I think that was the chance humanity had.
Really, because
I truly-
Mao came out of Soviet Russia.
Yeah, no, I honestly think that the United States in 45, I think we should have just been like, this isn't going to be pretty. and I think we should have just destroyed the rest
but I
of the
also
world.
think that what comes.
I think there would have been less I think there would be less eventual hardship and human suffering if we just went.
I disagree. I think our ability to create hardship for ourselves is.
Do you think we would have wiped them out, but then eventually there'd just be factions of the U.S. and we'd be right back to block one?
Yeah.
I mean,
Carlin, he's sleeping with his eyes open.
Let him sleep.
No, it's freaking me out. His eyes are open.
Wait.
I don't like
Chris
it.
is dead.